All right, let's get into it. The story we're diving into today, it's just wild. Seriously, it sounds like something ripped straight from a sci-fi novel. We're talking about Egyptian pyramids in rural Georgia, a charismatic leader who claimed he was from another planet, and a community's search for utopia that ended, well, that ended in a supermax prison.
And that's really the core question here, isn't it? How in the world does one guy convince hundreds of people to build this incredible world for him, only for it all to come crashing down in one of the longest prison sentences in U.S. history?
Okay, so to really get how it all ended, we have to go back to the beginning. We need to look at the strange world he built, and of course, the man who was at the very center of it all.
So picture this. You're driving down some back road in Georgia, right? It's the 1990s, and all of a sudden you see this. 40-foot pyramids, giant obelisks, a massive sphinx just rising out of the fields. It's totally bizarre. This was Tamarai, the headquarters for something called the New Wabian Nation, and it was the real-life version of one man's very, very strange vision.
You see, you can't really wrap your head around Tamaray without getting to know its creator. But, well, that's where it gets complicated, because this was a guy who was constantly reinventing himself, starting with his own name, his own history, everything.
Now, he would later claim he was born in Sudan, but yeah, FBI records say he was born Dwight York in Baltimore. His early life, pretty much a series of run-ins with the law. But it was a prison sentence in the mid-60s that really changed everything for him. That's where he converted to Islam, and you can see how that planted the seeds for the religious movements he would eventually lead.
And this, right here, this was his whole strategy. Dwight York becomes Dr. York. Then he's Isa al-Hadi al-Mahdi when he's positioning himself as this Islamic leader. Then suddenly, he's Chief Black Eagle, claiming Native American heritage. And finally, my personal favorite, the man from planet Rizq. You see, each name was a brand new identity, a whole new mythology cooked up to pull in a different crowd.
So it wasn't just the names that were changing. With every new identity, he rolled out a whole new set of beliefs, and he started weaving all of them together into this cosmic doctrine that was, truly one of a kind. Now here's a really clever move. York was very careful not to call his teachings a religion. Instead, he called it Nuwa Wupu, a factology, and that distinction is so important. He was saying, my words aren't something you have to believe in, they're something you have to know. He was basically trying to set himself up not as a prophet of faith, but as a messenger of, undeniable scientific fact. And wow, was he prolific in sharing these so-called facts. York wrote over 450 books and pamphlets. He created this enormous library of his own scripture that covered everything you could imagine. Ancient history, UFOs, you name it. It was all designed to make sure his voice was the final word, the ultimate authority on, well, everything.
Okay, so his main text, his magnum opus, was called the Holy Tablets. And the claim he made about it was just unbelievably bold. He said this wasn't just another holy book. No, this was the original source. The text that things like the Bible and the Quran had been corrupted from. With that one move, he was trying to put himself above every single prophet in history. The audacity. So what was actually in this factology? Well, it was a wild mix, a real cosmic gumbo, if you will. He taught that black people were descendants of aliens from a planet called Rizq. He took the Yaqub myth from the Nation of Islam, this idea that a black scientist created the white race. And to top it all off, he promised a literal spaceship, Nibiru, would show up in 2003 to save his chosen 144,000 followers. You can see how this blend would create this incredibly powerful new origin story for people who felt completely cut off from mainstream American history. A really big part of his method was just rewriting history. He'd take real historical terms that people had heard of, like Moors and Nubians, and then just completely strip them of their actual meaning. He redefined them to fit into his own cosmic drama of alien gods and a chosen people. It's fascinating and pretty manipulative. All right, so you have this whole complex ideology, but it needs a physical home, right? It needs a kingdom. So after leaving Brooklyn, York set out to build exactly that for his followers, right there in the middle of rural Georgia. So in 1993, they buy this massive plot of land, 476 acres in Putnam County. And this wasn't just going to be some weekend retreat. No, this was meant to be the capital of a whole new nation. It was supposed to be a beacon for that mothership he kept promising.
And this compound, which they called Tamari, it quickly became a local spectacle. I mean, check out this quote from Time magazine back in 1999. The grounds contained 40-foot pyramids, obelisks, gods, goddesses, and a giant sphinx. It was like a slice of ancient Egypt just got dropped into the American South. And this crazy architecture, it wasn't just for looks. It was meant to be proof of that ancient, glorious heritage that York was claiming for his people. Right, so you can probably guess what happened next. The pyramids and obelisks started running into some issues with local zoning laws. So what does York do? He makes another one of his strategic pivots. He just declares his followers to be the Yamasee Native American Moors, a sovereign nation that isn't subject to U.S. law. This is a classic move right out of the sovereign citizen playbook. This belief that you can just opt out of the government's laws and authority. But here's the thing. While York was busy building this elaborate world of myths and pyramids, federal investigators started to believe he was also building something else entirely. Something much, much darker. A criminal enterprise built on power, money, and the absolute exploitation of children.
And then, in May 2002, federal agents raided Tamari. The charges that came out were just staggering. They used the RICO Act, that's a law designed to take down organized crime syndicates like the mafia, and they argued that the entire Nubian nation was basically a corrupt organization. But at the very heart of the case were these horrific allegations of child sexual abuse, alongside massive financial fraud. After a 3-week trial back in 2004, a jury found York guilty. And his sentence? Well, it tells you everything you need to know about how serious those convictions were. 135 years in federal prison. So, the prophet from planet Rizq? He's now inmate number 17911-054 at ADX Florence. That's a supermax prison, one of the most secure prisons on Earth. His projected release date is 2120. He's not getting out.
Now, as you might imagine, the conviction is still really controversial among his remaining followers. On one side, you have the prosecution's case, which was built on the really powerful testimony of 14 different victims. But the defense has always claimed that those witnesses were coerced by law enforcement. They often point to a 15-year plea deal that a judge threw out for being too lenient. And they argue that the FBI and the local sheriff's department actually profited by seizing and selling off all the land at Tamaray. And so that leaves us right back where we started, with this central, nagging question. Was Dwight York this messianic leader, a visionary trying to build a black utopia, a kind of safe harbor from a hostile world? Or was the entire thing, the pyramids, the spaceships, the so-called factology, was it all just an elaborate con? A stage for a master manipulator to build his own personal empire of exploitation? The truth, as it so often does, probably lies somewhere in that really disturbing overlap.